All right, today we're tackling one of the heaviest hitters in all of Western philosophy, Baruch Spinoza's Ethics. Now, this isn't just some dusty old book. It's a guide, a really radical one, that promises a path to not just understand the world, but to find a real, lasting happiness. So, let's jump right in.
But before we get into Spinoza, let me ask you something. Just think about it for a second. Are you really in control of your emotions? Or do they kind of have a mind of their own, pulling you around all day? That feeling of joy when something goes right, that flash of anger in traffic, that little nod of anxiety about what's next. Are you the one in the driver's seat? This is the exact problem Spinoza was obsessed with solving more than 350 years ago.
So Spinoza had this really powerful, kind of shocking name for this state of being yanked around by our feelings. He called it human bondage. Yeah, bondage, or servitude. I mean, think about that. He's saying that if we don't understand our emotions, we are, in a very real sense, slaves to them. Let's dig into what he meant by that.
So here's Spinoza's diagnosis. When we're in this state, we're not actually free. Not at all. We're just reacting. We're like a little boat getting tossed around by the waves of external events, constantly chasing things that bring us pleasure and running from things that cause us pain. Our happiness is totally at the mercy of things we can't control, and that is the fundamental problem his book, Ethics, sets out to solve.
And his solution? Well, it was all laid out in this masterpiece, which was so controversial it was only published after he died. The full title is, get this, Ethics Demonstrated in Geometrical Order. Now, that's not just some fancy academic-sounding title. He meant it literally. Spinoza built his entire argument like a geometry proof, with axioms, definitions, and propositions, because he believed he could prove the path to freedom with absolute logical certainty. It's an absolutely wild approach.
So where does this bulletproof, logical proof for happiness begin? Well, you might be surprised. It doesn't start with mindfulness exercises or positive affirmations. Nope, it starts with the nature of reality itself. Spinoza's big idea is that you can't possibly fix your inner world until you have a crystal clear understanding of the outer world and exactly where you fit into the whole scheme of things.
And this is where things get really, really radical. On the left, you've got the standard traditional view of God from his time. You know, a sort of super powerful king who lives up there, separate from the universe, making choices and judging people. Spinoza looked at that and said, no way. As you see on the right, his view was that God is the universe. They're the same thing. There's only one substance in all of existence, and everything, you, me, this planet, the stars, every single thought, we're all just different parts or modes of that one single thing.
He had this perfect, iconic phrase for it, and it sums up his whole metaphysics. Deus sive natura. It's Latin for God or nature. For Spinoza, you could swap those words out anytime, anywhere. They mean the exact same thing. They're just two names for the single, infinite, eternal system of reality that is everything.
Now, there's a formal name for this belief, and it's called pantheism. It's the idea that God isn't some person-like creator who stands apart from the world. God is the world. God is totally immanent, meaning God is in everything because God literally is everything.
Okay, so if God is nature, what does that imply? This is the next critical step, total determinism. Spinoza used this great analogy of a triangle. Just like the properties of a triangle, that its angles add up to 180 degrees, for instance, flow with absolute necessity from what a triangle is, everything in the entire universe flows with that exact same necessity from the nature of God/nature. And if you follow that logic, well, it means there's no randomness, no chance, and the big one, no free will.
All right, so he's laid out this incredibly rigid, deterministic view of reality. What's next? Well, he takes that same precise, logical approach and points it directly at the messy, chaotic world of our feelings. He was convinced that emotions weren't these mysterious, unpredictable forces. Nope, they could be analyzed and understood with the same precision as any other part of nature.
So how in the world does he do that? He starts with just two fundamental building blocks. He calls them affects. The first is joy. For Spinoza, joy isn't just a vague, happy feeling. It has a precise definition. It's the feeling of transitioning to a state of greater perfection or power. And its opposite, of course, is sadness, the feeling of moving to a state of lesser perfection. He argues that every single emotion you've ever felt is just a combination of these two.
And just look at how elegantly this works. Take something like love. For Spinoza, it's not some magical, unknowable thing. It's simply joy accompanied by the idea of an external cause. You feel your power and well-being increasing, and you connect that feeling to a person or a thing. Boom, that's love. Hate? Same logic, just the other way around. Sadness accompanied by an external cause. And what about hope and fear? They're just joy and sadness mixed with a dose of uncertainty about the future. It's incredible, right? It's like he created a periodic table for our emotions.
This is what that geometrical method he talked about really looks like when applied to our minds. He's showing us that our inner life, which feels so chaotic, actually has a logical structure. And here's the key. By understanding the causes of our passions, we take the very first step toward not being a slave to them. We start to shift from being a passive person who just reacts to an active person who understands.
Okay, so this brings us to the absolute heart of Spinoza's whole project. We've talked about God being nature, about determinism, about the geometry of emotions, but how does all of this heavy philosophy actually make you free? This quote right here gives us a huge clue. A free man thinks of nothing less than of death. Think about that. The person who achieves the freedom Spinoza is talking about isn't haunted by the biggest fear of all. Why? Because they've been liberated from the destructive passions that poison our minds, and that allows them to focus all their energy on living a life guided by reason. So here's the actual path, broken down into 4 steps. Step 1, you have to actually acknowledge your passions. Don't ignore them. Recognize they're powerful. Step 2, use your reason to figure out where they're really coming from, their true external causes. Now, step 3 is the giant leap. You have to see that those causes and your emotional reaction to them were all necessary. It all had to happen exactly as it did. And when you truly grasp that, you arrive at step 4, a state of rational tranquility. I mean, how can you be consumed by regret or blame or resentment when you fully understand that things could not possibly have been any different?
This incredible ultimate perspective he's describing has this beautiful Latin name, sub specie aeternitatis. It means seeing the world under the aspect of eternity. It's the mental power to zoom out, to see any single event, no matter how frustrating or painful it feels in the moment, not as some random, terrible thing happening to you, but as one tiny, necessary, logical link in the infinite chain of cause and effect that is God or nature.
And this is the great paradox at the heart of Spinoza's philosophy. We almost always think freedom means having the power to choose, free will. Spinoza just flips that entire idea on its head. For him, true freedom isn't about choice. It's the deep inner peace and empowerment that comes from understanding exactly why you couldn't have chosen otherwise. It's freedom from the chaos of destructive emotions, and you get there by understanding necessity.
So, as you can probably guess, these ideas didn't exactly get a warm welcome in the 17th century. Actually, that's a huge understatement. They were considered unbelievably dangerous.
And here's exactly why. The book was officially condemned as profane, blasphemous, and atheistic. Why? Well, by saying God was nature, it got rid of the personal, king-like God of traditional religion. By denying free will, it completely pulled the rug out from under the whole system of divine reward and punishment. And by saying there's no divine plan or purpose, it left humanity in a universe that was perfectly rational, sure, but one that wasn't designed with our happiness in mind.
The official backlash was immediate. Just 1 year after it came out, the Dutch government banned all of Spinoza's works. For the next century, ethics was basically an illegal, underground book, read in secret by thinkers who were both terrified and completely captivated by its airtight logic. But eventually, by the 19th century, the world started to catch up, and Spinoza went from being a heretic to being celebrated as a true revolutionary by giants like Hegel, Goethe, and Nietzsche.
Spinoza himself knew this path was not for the faint of heart. In fact, these are the very last words he wrote in the entire book. He's admitting, look, this is hard. What I'm describing requires a ton of mental effort. But the payoff, what he calls a state of blessedness and tranquility, is so rare and so excellent that it's worth the climb. And so, we're left with the same radical question we started with. What if real freedom isn't about having endless choices? What if, instead, true freedom is the power that comes from deep understanding? It's a direct challenge to one of our most fundamental beliefs about ourselves, and it's the core of Spinoza's incredible vision of a liberated life.